Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? All right, let's get into something that Andy was talking about that should have everybody thinking twice about buying gold and silver. I think his message is pretty clear, and Andy has done a phenomenal job of really just analyzing all the reasons why we are going back to gold. And so I don't want you to take my word for it. Let's just listen to Andy here in just a moment. But before we get started, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button. And if you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. If you're thinking about buying gold and silver, head on over to our friends at Money Metals Exchange. The link will be down below in the description. If you are a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code PIMPYSILVER. Yes, it has changed. PIMPYSILVER. So if you're watching this video and it's an older video, make sure you check on current videos, because the code is going to be changing from time to time from now on. Also, I can be found on other platforms. Everybody knows I have my own website, Pimpy's News Network. Over here, I post videos that I can't get away with over on YouTube. Also, I have a group on Facebook called Pimpy's Investment Chat. Over here, we do talk about gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, as well as foreign currency investments. Come on over here and join us. It's free to do so. You can also come follow me on Twitter, MeWe, YouTube, and Odyssey. The links for all these platforms will be down below in the description. So for whatever reason, if I get removed off of one platform, you could find me on the others. For those of you looking for my address, there it is right here. Pause the video and go ahead and write it down, and feel free to reach out to me. Taking a look at cryptos, it looks like they recovered just fine. Yesterday, they were starting to take off and then got smashed down just a little. But now they're heading back in the right direction, so let's get into this. Bitcoin's at $24,633. We got Ethereum at $1,697. XRP's at 39 cents. Cardano's at 40 cents. Polygon's at $1.54. Dogecoin's at 8 cents. Hex is at 5.5 cents. Solana is at $23.41. Polkadot is at $7.29. And Litecoin has leapfrogged over Shiba as far as market cap is concerned, sitting at $101.32. Shiba is at 4013. It looks like all of them are in the green. We got Terra Luna Classic at 3002, looking good. And Saitama at 2029. Look out now. It continues to creep up real slow. It's up 5.91% for the day. Gold is rebounding just a little bit, sitting at $1,842.20 per ounce. Silver coming up as well at $21.71. And right here is Andy Shipman. If you have a chance, I want you to come check out this whole interview. It's about an hour long or so. I'll leave a link for it down below. But Andy makes really some good points about needing gold and silver, where the world is going and what direction. You're going to hear him say the same thing that I do. If anything, you're going to want to have gold and silver so you have something outside of the system. But for now, let's go ahead and listen to him talk about some things that have happened in recent history that started everything into motion as far as gold and silver revaluation.
I guess debatable. And, you wonder where Gaddafi's gold is, where Saddam Hussein's gold is. Just saying, the Ukraine sold at $25 billion worth of gold to fund the war. Where did that go? So I don't know where the U.S., if the U.S. was accumulating gold or if they weren't, or if they were getting it in other ways.
If you guys remember, there was a lot of gold both Saddam Hussein had as well as Gaddafi, and it just disappeared. The reason why they are dead today, and I know we're told that they're bad, evil men, and they were attacking their people and terrible dictators and the whole 9 yards. But the truth of the matter is that those two countries wanted to go to a gold-backed dinar and get away from the U.S. dollar as the petrodollar. And because of that, it cost them both their lives, and their gold disappeared.
But the U.S. certainly wasn't part of the narrative. These were all the Eastern European banks. And ironically, most of the banks that were doing it were either part of the European Union or in that general region, but most of them did not trade the euro. They traded their own currency within the European Union. So these are the banks that I believe ultimately will shift towards the BRICS nations. I digress. 2020, I start to notice the second very interesting piece of the puzzle, and that was the Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative. And this is the largest infrastructure project in human history, and it's connecting Asia and Africa and parts of South America and Europe, the old Silk Road.
But that's been developing for, over a decade
It
now?
has been, but it really started to gain traction in 2020. And I'm looking at it and realizing that all 13 OPEC producing countries are on the Belt Road. Almost 70% of human population and 40% of global GDP on this growing group of countries. And it's all void of U.S. dollar participation. Most of it settling on the new Chinese digital yuan. And so it started to get I started to get this feeling that, look, a lot of the countries that are part of the Belt Road, China and India and Russia, and these are countries that are accumulating all of the gold and producing all of the gold. And you start to see this growing group of countries and kind of the isolation of the dollar. Now this...
Yes, that's because they want all of their currency backed by gold. They are going to the gold standard. All the Western people, for the most part, Canada, United States, Britain, they're all being forced into the central bank digital currency.
Really didn't all fit into what I was talking about until shortly after 2021. 2020, the banks are still buying gold. And 2021 rolls around and we see the day that we leave Afghanistan in a very unharmonious way. Saudi Arabia, I think, at that point, signed the death warrant for the end of the petrodollar the day we left Afghanistan or the day after. And I think there is no coincidence in the timing. Saudi Arabia announces a joint military cooperation agreement with Russia. I often ask...
And just to recap, leaving Afghanistan, deserting weapons, deserting allies,
yes.
Deserting personnel.
Leaving our own servicemen and women behind enemy lines was something that would have been considered inconceivable in the United States that I grew up in. And
well, that's because Joe Biden could care less about our military men and women, just like Obama. So this is Obama's third term. And he crapped all over our veterans back then. He's crapping on them now, so nobody should be surprised by this.
I think that really signaled something to our allies and certainly to our foes. And, I asked people what makes the dollar the world reserve currency, and most people don't know. But in 1974, 3 years after we closed the gold window, Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and struck a deal with the Saudi kingdom and said, hey, we'll protect you, but for that, you'll denominate oil globally in dollars. And they have through OPEC. And this has created a massive synthetic demand for the dollar for the last 50 years. Signaling a change in that by a joint military cooperation agreement with Russia was a huge, huge move that really got very little, if any, attention in the Western media. But now things are really starting to click in for me. And I'm starting to see not only global de-dollarization, but also groupings that are growing together, like all 13 of the OPEC producing countries on the...
So the world is turning away from the dollar. The dollar will no longer be the reserve currency. When that finally happens, and it just takes a move by Saudi Arabia, then you're going to see 30, 40, 50% of the purchasing power of the dollar drop. And you better be holding on to gold and silver, because if you're not, you're going to lose your ass off.
The Belt Road. Like shortly thereafter, China and Nigeria, who also signed the same contract with Russia, selling their gold to China for the Petro Yuan bond, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And this is how countries like Iran have sidestepped sanctions for quite some time, selling their oil to China for a bond that is immediately convertible into gold, and they take possession of it right off the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So these things are starting to speed up at this point, and I'm really starting to notice that there's a growing group of countries that are formulating around the BRICS that are, I think, coalescing against the dollar, the hypocrisy, the hegemony of the dollar. And you could see it, you could feel it, and you could watch all of the gold that was being sent eastward and the accumulation and the de-dollarization. 2022 rolls along and the weaponization of the dollar, as you mentioned, where I believe it's not the prerogative of the West to say who can and can't use the world reserve currency. It should be more for public opinion, not for the administrator of the currency to decide who can and can't use it. And it was that moment, and I often ask people, do you think this was intended?
Yeah, it was intended. I told you that the United States was using the SWIFT system as a weapon. It was using a dollar as a weapon to crush other currencies. And especially when countries would not align up with what it is the United States and this World Economic Forum wanted, they were punished. The media did their job as propagandists. They lied to us and tried to make it sound like these people were the boogeyman. And come to find out they weren't. They're just tired of being bullied by the United States through a system that was affecting their economy, and the United States knew that.
You know, we have 130 trillion in debt, 31 trillion that's on balance sheet, and Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, which is 55 trillion underfunded in and of itself, and government military pensions, render us insolvent. Most of this debt accumulated at the lowest interest rates in human history. Was it intended? Did we want to pick a villain to create this great reset, to all of a sudden start the de-dollarization? And this is where the story gets very interesting as it turns from here.
Okay, well, let's revisit some of those points there. So the dollar starts to unravel in this narrative when Saudi Arabia starts to make deals with China and the petrodollar is in jeopardy. So you're saying Saudi Arabia is now looking at Russia for protection?
Well, it's not just that. Remember, at Davos, Saudi Arabia told the world that they're now going to be entertaining using other people's currencies to buy oil and no longer using the dollar.
If you're Saudi Arabia, you're thinking two things. For one thing, you're watching how the dollar was weaponized in the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and you're going, well, we don't want that. We can't have that happen to our assets. What if the U.S. wakes up one morning and don't like our human rights policies, for example, or something else, or some other situation that could happen in the Middle East and decides to do the same to us? Maybe this isn't the best way to keep our reserves. But you've also got Russia not really projecting tremendous strength via this conflict in Ukraine.
I said that so many times. I said, you watch these headlines in our media going, oh, Russia's getting beat, Russia's getting beat. And I was like, what do you mean they're not even doing anything? You know, the media is going to have us think one or two things. Either that Russia was never as strong as we thought they were, and they're a bunch of wusses getting their butt kicked by this tiny little country, or they send in their D-League players against the best players that Ukraine has until they get tired of playing with them like a cat with a mouse and just annihilate all the people in Ukraine. That hasn't happened yet, but now they got 250,000 troops getting ready to go to the border that Putin's getting ready to send. So once that happens, it's over with.
So why would the Saudis make such a bold decision before seeing who is the bigger military power in play?
Yes, that is part of the equation. That's a fair statement. This was before the Ukraine invasion, number one. And secondly, you know, the day after these announcements came out, Zero Hedge ran an article saying Saudi Arabia announces to the world that their nuclear submarines are outfitted with hypersonic ICBMs. This is the technology the West doesn't have. The State Department commented and said they're very concerned about it. These are the missiles that can go Mach 10 up in the atmosphere and hit the ground at the speed of an asteroid. That was, I think, their way of saying, don't even try to do what you did to Gaddafi and Hussein. Don't even think about it. It was a veiled threat, let's say.
Oh, there's no doubt that the reason why we're going after Russia and using Ukraine as a proxy country is because of the fact that they had said that them and China were going to be moving into a gold-backed currency and wanted to get away from the U.S. dollar, just like we did to Saddam Hussein, along with Gaddafi. Now we have Putin and Xi Jinping.
And I think this is another reason why when you realize that also last year we see the Saudis say, well, we have submitted our application to the BRICS. So you have a growing unison of countries that are joining together that in and of themselves maybe can't project that strength, maybe can't stand up to the West But together as a group, their militaries are stronger, their GDPs are bigger. I think it's a growing chorus of countries standing up to that hypocrisy, standing up to the West in a way that they've never been able to do in and of themselves. And
well, we'll leave the word hypocrisy aside for now, but let's just say standing up to a system where the U.S. can continue to print dollars, and then that makes the debt that they owe the U.S. become bigger and bigger and bigger.
Absolutely.
So we'll put aside the moral argument of the U.S.'s role on the global stage.
Yes, and it is a perceived hypocrisy. I'm not saying it is, but that's their perception.
Oh, I'll say that it is. It absolutely is. I've been saying this now for a couple years, that the world is getting tired of the United States weaponizing the SWIFT system and bullying people around. Eventually, they would stand up against the United States, and it looks like it's happening.
That's a fair enough point. So we're going to see this bifurcation of the global monetary system.
Absolutely.
Break that down in further detail. How does this play out from here?
Well, you have all of these countries joining the BRICS that you put them all together along with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Belt Road. You're talking north of 80% of human population. And all it would take, now you have to remember, we're coming from a period of time where asset prices were blown sky high over the last several years, with more money being created in the last 3 than in the history of the country preceding it. A lot of that money found its way into assets, and you have the misallocation and the distortions that are created by this. All it would take would be for Saudi Arabia to stand up on the stage, as they just told the folks at the Davos conference that we're now going to consider taking other currencies for oil. We've already been told that the BRICS currency would be pegged to gold or to commodities, and the assumption being gold being one of the commodities. I think all it would take would be Saudi Arabia to say to the West, thanks for the...
You know one of them is going to be gold. Why do you think they're buying up so much of it? If you look at the top countries purchasing gold right now, it's all the ones that are taking a stand finally against the United States.
The memories, it's been great. We appreciate it. But we're going to open up oil purchases in other currencies, not just dollars, maybe euros and ruble and rupee and gold. And
you want to pay attention to which countries they open up to, that they are allowed to use their currencies, because those would be the ones you want to invest in. Because as the dollar drops in value, because it's no longer the greenback reserve dollar, those other currencies are going to rise up against the US dollar.
All of a sudden, bang, all of the countries that have had to hold dollars for the last 50 years no longer really have any interest in holding them. And if they all start to dump dollars, and I think it would happen quickly, where they would all dump dollars, you have a tsunami of inflation hitting the shores of the West that would immediately create a spike in interest rates to compensate for the loss of purchasing power. This is how we see a great reset, as interest rates spike in relation to a crashing dollar.
And what is the one thing that protects you against inflation? Gold.
Which then is inversely correlated to asset prices that have gone stratospheric over the last few years, and I would argue irrationally. And as interest rates spike and this inverse correlation hits the shores, stocks, bonds, and real estate, along with the crashing dollar, all collapse at the very same time.
Yeah. I did. I know you're thinking it. Didn't I hear Pimpy say that so many times? Yes. Yes, I did. People are arguing that that's not going to happen in real estate, Pimpy. It's not going to happen. I said, oh, yes, it is. So for me, like I live in California, and I've been saying that I'm going to sell my house here over and over, just so you understand. It's kind of hard because it's a family house. But it looks like I'm going to have to get past that. Already we're starting to see a decline in home values. But get the house sold and then get that money and then store it up into gold, because it's easily liquidated. And then when the time comes and we bottom out, then that's when you start buying back in. Then everything is really cheap. So you have a lot of money from the sales that are overinflated assets now ready in cash, so that when the time comes, you can turn around and start buying back into the market when everything is dropped down dramatically.
And when I ask, do you think it was intended? I guess I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek, but if you think about it, now you have a villain. Instead of blaming the Fed for creating these distortions and letting this happen, you have the Fed there saying they're going to raise rates, but they've done a woeful job at raising them high enough to tackle inflation.
All right, let's put a pause on that one before we get into the Great Reset, which I understand also opens the way for central bank digital currencies and a complete revamp of the system. And let's first focus on how we get to this de-dollarized global economy, or at least an economy where the dollar plays a less significant role. So in this bifurcation of the global monetary system, what relevance does the dollar have?
Dollar will
it's still in play.
Yeah, the dollar will always have a relevance to it, and maybe it's not in its current state. But the thing that I think is really important to understand is that these agreements that are being made with the BRICS represent such a massive part of GDP and of population. And at what point does the West decide to or attempt to trade with this group? Are they even going to be welcomed into it? I don't know. It just seems they're being isolated.
Well, because the dollar is so powerful and because the United States has enjoyed so much privilege having the global reserve currency, why would it just give it up without a fight?
Well, they will fight, and they won't just give it up. But a lot of people will make the analogy to the euro, that all these countries came together and it didn't work. And I think there's something to be said for that. But when you look at all of these countries coming together in a similar rallying cry, for whatever that rallying cry is against the West, it is the backing of the new system by commodities, and perhaps all of it denoted on a distributed ledger, the digital yuan, which has been running for the last 4 years.
See, when Trump was in office, he was trying to line things up so that we can go back to the gold standard. And this guy was bringing back all the manufacturing here to our country. He was doing everything possible to set us up so that we're ready for whatever is coming towards us. And, for whatever reason, he's not in office, and we all know the real reason why. My thing is this: if Trump got back in office, the first thing he would do, and I have no doubt he would, and that would be to turn around and move us into the gold standard right away. He would agree with the other countries, and they would all move into the gold standard instead of us being left behind if anybody else is in office.
Backing the Belt Road to the tune of over $20 billion in successful transactions would be, I believe, the rails to a new BRICS currency that would show the immutability of what every country pegged or pledged to the new system. That gives it the glue to make it work, where everyone has the same equal footing, equal say at the table. This, to me, is what would make the system work. As Zoltan Pozsar calls it, a new system backed by commodities, Bretton Woods 3, rather than a system backed by debt instruments and promises.
So you can see the importance of having gold and silver. All right, I know we keep saying gold, but the truth is gold and silver, they go hand in hand. So if you can't afford gold, then go ahead and buy silver. Start stacking now. You can understand why it is I'm saying that if you have all your money in the bank, which is a terrible, terrible idea, but if you have all your money in the bank, at least take 25, 30%, move it into gold and silver. This way, then you're protected. I know a lot of people have converted all of their 401ks and IRAs just by reaching out to Money Metals, and they will help you. And you won't have to pay no taxes. There's no penalties for the conversion. All right? Because a lot of people are going, oh, man, I don't want to pay the taxes on the conversion. Yeah, you don't have to. Don't worry about it. That's why I'm saying to reach out to Money Metals at 1-800-800-1865 and ask them to help walk you through the process. It isn't very hard. It's easy to do, and a lot of you have already done it. So go ahead and reach out to them. You'll protect yourself. You'll protect your family. You'll protect your wealth. And you'll be prepared for what's coming in the future. Anyways, that's it for now, you guys. Like I said, the whole entire interview, the link will be down below in the description. I appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll get back to you. I'm out.